Good afternoon, everyone. So today I will talk about some of the work that has been undertaken by UNESCO in the field of creative economy. And what is very good is that already from what I heard, everything you're doing is already pretty much reflected in what I will say and what has been done. So actually maybe I should not speak at all. So we have heard a lot of words like creativity, cultural goods and services. There is no real definition of creativity in the world of UNESCO. We have identified some definitions for like cultural expressions and cultural industries, and we broadly understand that creativity would be this cultural content plus other type of industries that are somehow fed by human creativity but are not necessarily cultural in nature, in pure nature. But most of what I will be talking deals with all the sectors in which you're involved, like books, painting, and audiovisual, etc. Our Director General Irina Bokova says, while creating jobs, the creative economy contributes to the overall well-being of communities, individual self-esteem and quality of life, thus achieving inclusive and sustainable development, which I think is why we are all here today, to try to promote these grand ideas and make them real. This is why last year, in December, this is very fresh, UNESCO and UNDP have published together this huge book, which is called the Creative Economy Report. It's a global report, so it touches on all regions and also on a lot of theoretical concepts. It's very interesting. It's a bit of a challenge to summarize that in 10-15 minutes, but you can access and download this document online if you're interested. I will just highlight a few of the elements. This is not the first edition of the Creative Economy Report. There were two previous reports which were done in 2011 and 2009 by UNCTAD, so they took a more economical perspective to it. This report now is trying to take a different focus, which is much more also related to the social aspects and the community aspects. That's why a lot of the examples and theory which are actually described here are dealing with creative economy at local levels, meaning with the cities at the heart of the activity and not necessarily the top-down approach that has been taken originally. Nevertheless, it's important to know that synergies between these two levels are important if you want the system to work. It's also including a lot of case studies, 35 case studies from cities around the world or specific projects, including Chiang Mai Creative City, it's in there. And there are a more analytical part, trying to identify critical factors for success and recommendation. What is really crucial is that this is one of the first major research documents that acknowledge the dual nature of culture and culture value, the economic value and the non-monetary benefits. So economic value, I think we are all pretty much aware that cultural industries are an industries. We are selling goods, we are selling services. Here, most people are involved in the culture sector, so I am a little bit preaching to the converters. But when you talk to higher government level, convincing government officials that culture is important can be a little bit of a challenge. This is why some of these initiatives are trying to put figures, and most importantly, dollar figures, on the contribution of culture. So some of the very broad figures are speaking. Like, it's a very rapidly growing sector, especially, for instance, in Asia. There are lots of detailed tables in the report that you can consult. But globally, we are talking about world trade of 624 billion in 2011. It's not a small amount of money. And the exports of creative goods are also increasing very fast. There have been many studies about trying to measure the contribution of culture to the GDP and to the employment of several of the sectors. And Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, Thailand also actually can measure a contribution of 10% of more of the GDP. So when you start talking about that, maybe officials are listening a little bit more attentively. But of course, what is more important for us is that there is this economic value, but there is also this non-monetary benefits. And this is what you're all trying to say here. There are communities. And these cultural and creative industries are definitively a transformative sectors. They are dealing with people, with communities. They are interested in empowering these groups. Especially, it's a very good way to empower and give a voice to some of the more marginalized groups. You're all trying to focus on the well-being of communities, improving quality of life by giving pride into the people so that they can have their confidence in their creation and in their cultural roots, in their identity. So there are, I said, 35 examples. I just picked up one, but there are so many that are interesting. This one is from India, for instance, where they are doing block printing. Block printing is a pretty traditional form of handicraft. You've probably seen it. It has been exported over years all over the world. At the same time, it was decreasing because of competition, but because of specific projects, some designers have managed to revitalize these skills and make it again an economic form of livelihood for the communities. But by doing that, not only they gave an income to the craft or to the artisans, but they also contributed to maintaining this traditional apprenticeship and transfer of skill systems. So keeping the community together in a more linked way. This report is also moving forward an important agenda for UNESCO, which is trying to, at the global level, include culture in the global development agenda. You may have heard of the Millennium Development Goals, which is over 15 years, like by 2015, every country has agreed to reach a number of objectives in terms of health, education, and development, etc. So there were like 8 goals, all UN agencies and global institutions and government strive to achieve these goals. One of the big losers of these goals was culture. It was not included. As a result, it means that culture projects or culture-led projects actually lost a lot of opportunities for funding. And as we know, funding is often the source of getting to objectives and achievements. So UNESCO and other institutions and several governments are also pushing to have culture acknowledged as one of the drivers of the development. And this is trying to document this process. Some of the critical factors that have been identified have been already also mentioned by some of you. Access to financing is of course core to it. The ability of actually identifying the intermediaries, the people who will be key in the change and towards the acknowledgement of cultural industries and creativity, the movers and shakers of your cities, and I think you are the movers and shakers. That's why you're here, because you're promoting these objectives. The importance of having good infrastructure, not only hard infrastructure, like buildings, etc., but also soft infrastructure, legal, human resource, education, etc. And of course, cities are often the center of creativity because you have this cluster, this hub effect. But we should not forget that creativity is everywhere outside the cities too, and remoteness, distance towards the market is often a big challenge for some of the creative thinkers who are outside the cities. So trying to think in terms of infrastructure. Of course, intellectual property and copyright, this is always a hot topic, a very difficult one to treat and to address, because there is no universal copyright system or copyright law, yet it remains a major element of discussion among the thinkers, among the creators. The importance of capacity building and trying to facilitate these flows of information and of people. So some of the 10 keys that have been identified, some of them are already have already been addressed. I would like to go through a few. Like one thing that we haven't talked is the connection between the formal and informal sector, which has already been mentioned. This is a very important part because, as many of you say, it's sometimes very difficult to quantify what is happening, taking place in the informal sector. There have been attempts to actually quantify, but it's always difficult. One of these key is to map local assets. And the importance of that is to try to understand what are your human assets, your social assets, your infrastructure assets in order to identify potential successful strategies. So this is an example that we have done in Laos, for instance, 2 years ago. Laos is being a very small country, we were not expecting to get a lot of results. Nevertheless, within just a few weeks, our consultant managed to really identify over like 90 creators and map 11 subsectors. And this has actually helped to identify the priorities, not only for the Lao government, but also for the civil society and the private sectors, with like the importance of establishing proper communication device and system and networks being very much top of the priority. So all these interlinkages, talking to people seems to be really important. And this was followed very closely by the importance of having an enabling environment. In this we have to understand like having legal infrastructure also that will support the creative sector. Another of the key that I've been identified is the importance of rigorous data collection for evidence-based policy. So why cultural statistics? Of course, it's easier to have statistics if you want to monitor your policy or your action or evaluate the social contribution of culture. So a few years ago, UNESCO has developed something which is called the Framework for Cultural Statistics. So it's a framework. It's not like a tool that you apply directly. It's a guide. But the idea is to try to mainstream information and in a comparable manner between countries. And it has identified a number of cultural domains. Some of them are the same as like other models like the WIPO model or UNCTAD model, but there are always small differences. Cultural natural heritage, performance celebration, visual arts and craft, book and press, audiovisual and media, design and creative sector services, with tourism and sport being called related domains. The strength of this tool, of this framework, is that it actually builds on existing data. One of the issues that has come up a lot is the incapability of having surveys every year, and this allows the governments, the statistic office, to use existing classification system standards that they already have. So we did a pilot in Thailand last year with the NSO and the Ministry of Culture, also in collaboration with the British Council, where the Thai team actually studied their existing data. So the labor force survey, the business survey, these are collected every year or every quarter, so they have the data. And trying to extract from this existing data what was related to the creative sector. And this yielded very interesting results. For instance, this is a very quick mapping of the type of work people do and in which sector people do. And it shows very predominantly that the orange part is design, it's craft, it's things made by hand. So a lot of people in Thailand, based on existing data, like more than 1 million Thai are actually making products by hand. So if you are doing some type of labor policy, like this is the type, like you're talking about reaching 1 million people already if you target them, if you target the craft sector. We have 100,000 to 200,000 people in jewelry, textile, and wood sector. It shows again the weight of these sectors, which you may not really think of. So it would be the 8th largest employer in Thailand, more than the industry, more than the transport sector. So there is a lot to do with the crafts, with the handmade sector. Back to the report and to its structure. Another key factor is the importance to invest in the value chain, like in creative enterprise development across the value chain. The value chain that is presented here has 5 steps: creation, production, dissemination, exhibition, and consumption. And basically what is important, what is highlighted here, is that if you break this value chain, if the policies are not addressing one of these elements, for instance, the creative sector may just collapse because you just can't go through the cycle. So a lot of the government are, for instance, investing a lot in production, but if there is no creation at the beginning, at the origin, nobody will produce products that are valuable and that will be marketable. So this brings me to this convention, so this international treaty on the protection and promotion of the diversity of cultural expressions. This is the latest UNESCO normative instrument. So if governments sign this convention, they are committed to actually do a lot of things to support creative expression. In Asia Pacific, there are not that many members, only 13 parties at the moment. In Southeast Asia, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Indonesia have ratified it. And this is very important for the creative sector, because this document says that everybody has the right to create, produce, disseminate, and enjoy cultural goods, including their own. And it gives the right and the responsibility to the countries who are signing that to develop cultural policies that will create this enabling environment. So on the legal aspect, fiscal aspect, political, cultural, and informational. And this convention is the first one that actually links very much the top and the bottom by directly involving the creative sector and the civil society by calling the civil society to be involved in the management of the creative sector. So please, talk to your government, ratify this convention. Sorry, that was my commercial stunt. What is very relevant here is that it also talks about the international cooperation for development, the importance of networking between the cities. So I just would like to finish on one of these quotes of the future we want, which basically says there is an urgent need to find new development pathways that encourage creativity and innovation in the pursuit of inclusive, equitable, and sustainable growth and development. So that's what you're all doing, and I would like to thank you for that. Thank you.